Hi, this is Dr. Megan,
And this is Joe Smith.
and we're here with the Do Better podcast, trying to be live on Facebook, but it's not working. So, sorry for anyone who is hoping to listen on Facebook, but if you're listening now, that means you're checking us out on the actual podcast. So,
Yeah. At least now we have multiple different ways for you to interact with us, whether you're at home, um, in your in beach chair watching us, or you're in the car on the go listening to us. You have multiple different ways to just hang out with us. So
yep. So today we are here. We made it. It's March 31st. It's not our normal recording time, but we still got March in. Super excited about that. And I have this book, which I'm gonna try to do. I might have to turn off my green screen for those that are watching on video because we put this on YouTube as well. Um, Let me just do this real quick. So I'm doing, if you don't know, you can see my messy kitchen, but this is the book. It's called Self-Reg, How to Help Your Child and You Break the Stress Cycle and Successfully Engage with Life. So we're going to talk about that today. It came up for me because I'm doing a neuroscience meets ABA workshop, and we just had our first live session yesterday, March 30th. And we have it's a repeat, but we split it for people who are celebrating Eid or just also can't attend a Sunday workshop. We're doing it Monday, April 7th, Wednesday, April 8th, and Thursday, April 9th in like 2 hour chunks. And it's the same content. It's just I decided to do two live options for this one. And we also have the recording. But when I had to decide out of all of the various things in neuroscience, what to include as like our big take home, this is what you can put into practice, I had to focus on this book because it's just amazing. Have you ever read it?
no, I have not. And I have like a library of books that I want to read. It's just I just have so many books to go through.
Yeah.
And of course, as I go through my library, there's like maybe two or three more books that come out, and it's like, oh, I want to read that too.
Yeah. Yep. I
So,
know this one is like, I mean, I have a ton of books like that. I have probably a whole entire bookshelf of books I've bought but have not read. So, Stuart Shanker has studied stress and self-regulation for a really long time. He's a wonderful presenter. There's a whole entire like certification you can do of various different ones to learn more about self-regulation in the process. But basically looking at how not just like people will say, "Oh, I'm so stressed out," but it's thinking about what are the different domains within our life that we experience stress. So Joe, I'm curious if you can guess, like if we're thinking about things like when you picture doing an assessment with someone and there's different areas of their life that you're asking about, can you think of what any of the domains might be? And we've not ever talked about this, so you're purely guessing, and it's totally fine to be way off track.
so, for me, I'm thinking like the different domains would be like financial,
Ooh, that's a good one.
family,
Uh-huh.
work, probably, um, maybe interpersonal stress, like internally,
Mm-hmm.
like um, and then probably there will be one on relationships and between just like friendships, and probably stress um on your success, how you feel like how successful you are.
Okay, good. So you didn't use any of, I think maybe one term that he uses, but all of those would probably fit into the different domains. So you're definitely right there, understanding where stress comes from in your life.
Yeah.
So the five domains that he talks about are biological, which is like the first one that needs to be addressed. If we're experiencing stress in the biological domain, then it's pretty much almost impossible to look at anything else, right? Biological would incorporate things like our sleep being number one, which I think most of us don't get enough of.
Mhm.
Nutrition, exercise, how safe we are, like the environment and things like that. The second one is emotional. So looking at how well can the person navigate their emotions and shift, from being in like a sympathetic state where your fight or flight is activated to being back in a parasympathetic state, which I think you mentioned that in a few different ways with the different ones you
Yeah.
were talking about. And then the third one is cognitive, looking at like the cognitive load and how we're processing, like learning different skills and what kind of stress that's causing. Like if you're, for work or whatever, if you have a lot of treatment plans due, that's going to be a big cognitive stressor. Or if you're trying to learn a new skill or something like that. And then the fourth one is social. And what's really interesting about the social domain is it's not just looking at how we interact with people and like what kind of stress might be caused through those interactions or what kind of happiness might be created, but it's looking at how we like socially engage with one another. And um and really big focus on the more people understand that engagement piece and the reciprocity, social skills just sort of exist. You don't really have to explicitly teach them, they just come online. And of course, the more stress we experience, the harder it is to execute on those things. And then the last one is pro-social, which was really fascinating. I think for the work I do, it's not super as relevant because a lot of the clients I work with are younger, but it's the idea that we understand we're tribal basically, and we're trying to connect and have empathy genuinely for other people, and we're looking out for ourselves but also looking out for other people, especially those close to us, and how that interacts. And of course, the more stressed we are, the more we've seen it we've seen it with how this nation is going and COVID and everything. Like, people are not very pro-social right now, but they're all very stressed, right? So those are the five domains.
Neat. I like how you broke them up into like those different domains. Like, and it's just not a focus on like finance or like it there's more of a deeper meaning behind each domain, which I like.
Yeah. And then, so what the idea with the work that he's doing is we identify where potential stress could be experienced in those different domains. And then we also identify what skills do people have within those different domains to self-regulate, and then have that domain basically like be checked off. Like, okay, so when I'm experiencing biological stress, what skills do I have to self-regulate that? Do I know how to improve my sleep? Do I know how to improve my nutrition? Like, do I have resources available to do those things? So it goes through that whole, and then of course, the idea being that we're explicitly teaching our children, which I never got taught, and I don't think you probably did either. I know you've done a lot of self-learning on this too. We're teaching our children all of those different strategies as well to help create, happier lives for them and not have so much stress occurring all the time.
Yeah. And I really find it fascinating that the first domain is biological. I mean, it makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's one of the things that a lot of people neglect or people don't identify as being a major stressor and or the most immediate stressor in their life.
Yeah.
Um, everyone talks about like, yeah, you're a parent, you're supposed to have lack of sleep.
Yeah. There's just this assumption that we just deal with it.
Yeah, like the lack of sleep is great for you, and like I think you know one of the things that needs to be addressed with adults and or just the country in general, like is that sleep is so important that you should be focusing on how to sleep effectively or how to get the most amount of sleep. Because really, if you're not sleeping well, it will affect your health for the rest of your life. Um, and there are so many studies that I have heard of that have like that discusses how important sleep is, and that lack of sleep will detriment your ability to live a longer, healthier, fuller life.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. It's amazing how much like that's the first thing we always sacrifice, but it affects everything.
Everything, everything. And I also have noticed myself as I like in my 20s, I would sacrifice sleep and like, yeah, I'm gonna stay up late, I'm gonna get this work done. And now I'm like more like, no, I can't sacrifice sleep. I need that sleep, or I'm not going to be as productive in the morning or the rest of the day.
Yeah, well,
And
it's good that you're doing that and hopefully modeling that for your children too.
yeah, yeah, definitely because like I know for them, like if they do not go to bed at a certain time, like they are not ready for the next day very well. They're not prepared. They struggle more getting out of bed. Um, so yeah, it's definitely. I mean, of course, they want to stay up later. They want to be, with dad. They want to like stay up and watch videos and like nobody. We need to get to bed because like you got to get enough sleep.
Yeah. Yep.
So and
There
yeah,
oh, what are you gonna say?
I was gonna say yeah, I should be a better role model with going to bed on time, and I'm not. There's definitely nights that I stay up um after putting them to bed to finish session notes or finish something I need to complete before the morning. Just the nature of the beast. So it's like figuring like now for me like it's figuring out ways of in my day to be effective at getting that stuff done before I'm home with the family. So definitely a work in progress.
Yeah. At least you're trying to figure it out. So there were a couple of parts of the book that I thought were really interesting, and I thought we could maybe chat about them. First of all, just to let everyone know who's listening to this, the book itself goes through a pretty good, easy to understand introduction for on behavioral neuroscience and just looking at the different things that are affecting our behavior that happen inside our bodies. So highly recommend for just that reason alone. But one of the things that like the very first things I read in here that really like blew my mind was about, and I talk about this in the neuroscience workshop. I have a couple of videos that I show, but I'm curious if you've ever learned about in your programs, because you were more from the education background, but I think sometimes this is just a study that most people know about regardless of their background. Are you familiar with the marshmallow study or the marshmallow test?
No.
So you maybe have seen videos of it on like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook where parents put a like sweet in front of their child and they say, "Hey, leave this here. I need to go out of the room for a minute." And like it's like, does the child eat the sweets or wait till the parent comes back? Have you ever seen any videos with that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, you're gonna need to look into that.
I will. Like I should.
So when I was in undergrad and grad school, we always learned about the marshmallow test being a test of impulsivity, looking at how well can this child resist the temptation in front of them. And the children who would take it right away, or they like the real original study looked at the duration. So how long would the child go before they would call for the researcher to come back in. And the children who waited longer durations, they followed them for life. And they found that these were like preschool age children, but the ones who waited longer durations had better outcomes in life. They were less likely to develop addictions, less likely to struggle with mental health issues, like this whole slew of positive things. So there's this big, especially in the psychology field, just this big idea that impulsivity is bad. Basically, I mean, generally speaking, from a safety perspective, impulsivity isn't the greatest, but I think there's ways that you can learn how to navigate it, because a lot of folks with ADHD diagnosis are impulsive, but that's what some of the out of the box creative amazing things come from, so there's this like, what's really going on here. But what was interesting in this book is Dr. Shanker talks about how it's not really a test of impulsivity. It's a test of how they handle stress. Think about it. This little kid is going into a room with a sweet put in front of them. They don't know the person. It's a strange room that they've never been in before. Chewing is in and of itself regulatory, right? And like consuming something sweet sometimes for people is as well. So it's really like, what are we really testing here? Is it how well they can resist a temptation, or is it how they navigate experiencing stress?
Interesting.
Yeah, so I really loved that analysis and like discussion that he gave in there. So there's this big distinction within the the book, and we talk about this in the workshop too, between self-regulation and self-control. A lot of people are trying to teach folks to have self-control. And this is a whole, like, I didn't even get to talk about this as much as I wanted to in the workshop. So we'll probably talk about it a little bit more here. But we're trying to teach people how to be like have self-control, but we're not looking at what are their actual regulation skills. Right. So like they might be able to resist that temptation, but are they doing it regulated or are they doing it distressed? And what does that mean when like bigger temptations happen in the future or stressful things happen in the future?
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. I like absolutely loved it. And then what's really cool, I show this video in the workshop, but I looked up self-regulation or I looked up the marshmallow test, and NPR did a video with Sesame Street where they're showing self-regulation. And they're using, Cookie Monster and resisting eating the cookies, and they're walking him through like deep breathing exercises. So like that would be self-regulation, teaching like, hey, these are strategies you could use in a situation where you want to do something different than what your initial impulse would be, as opposed to like self-control is just sitting there trying to resist the thing, but your body is freaking out.
Yeah.
So I thought that, I mean, bringing it to clients, one of the things that came up for me, because he talks about this, but like my analysis was when we're teaching people, I wish I could remember so I could read the specific section, but when we're teaching people how to navigate like waiting or tolerating things. And well, I guess we didn't have clients together, but for me, when I first started in the field, I had like wait, give me, tolerating no, like all of those programs, all of my clients, all the time, we were constantly working on that stuff before all of the amazing advancements have been made with Hanley and PFASBT. Like I was doing skills-based treatment before it had a name, I guess. I don't know. But we were, working on that. And one of the issues that I constantly would have, but you'd think I guess I shouldn't say constantly. It would happen here and there. I would have clients where we're trying to work on waiting, especially, and the whole entire time they're just like cookie, 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 cookie. And they're just so hyper focused on the cookie. They're staying observably calm, right? They're not screaming, they're not engaging in challenging behavior, but they're like super over focused on the cookie that they're waiting for. So I would rewrite the program, and we focused on our target was no longer just waiting, it was being able to redirect their attention to something else.
Yeah.
So if they asked for a cookie and they were told to wait for it, it was like, let's do this puzzle, or like, let's do this thing. And how well we can be engaged with this activity is actually our criteria. It's not 5 seconds of waiting or 10 seconds of waiting. It's like a more naturalistic, okay, they've done a couple pieces. I think they're actually focused on the puzzle now. I'm going to go ahead and give them the cookie, right? To help with that. But that's a self-regulation skill, right? Being able to transition your attention from the thing you really want to something else helps you stay regulated.
I love that. I love that. And I love that shift too from just waiting to, hey, we have to wait for the cookie, let's go do something else. I
Yeah,
love that. And it helps them focus on something different.
right. Yep. And this, like, he talks about in like decent detail in the book about how if we're just teaching people, I'm going to try to find it. I think I like put the quote in the slides that I had, but if we're just teaching people how to tolerate things, we're not teaching the self-regulation. It just makes me wonder with the incredible work that's being done in the field. But you know me, I'm Dr. Do Better. Like I'm always thinking, how can we do this better? And I worry that sometimes people are like, man, she just criticizes everything. How do we keep moving forward if I'm not, looking at this is really great and we can do better
Better.
things still. So one of the pieces with this is I know a lot more programs are working on building in toleration,
Hmm.
right? Especially with PFA SBT.
Yes.
But, and this is the thing that keeps coming up for me, they're not focusing on emotional regulation. They're not focusing on self-regulation. They're not doing things. There's likely some co-regulation happening depending on where you are, but there's not like an explicit assessment and analysis being done of how well does this person regulate
Hmm.
their emotions and their body. Before we jump in on teaching them to tolerate things, how well do they do that? And what I think where a lot of people are seeing stuff break down, and I've been pointing this out gently places, is the child doesn't yet have the regulation skills to go through that skills-based treatment. And it's not just going to magically happen. Like there's this idea that, oh, if we use shaping at just the right, like we break it down small enough and we have the cab chains like broken down really small, then eventually they'll move through the different branches. And it's like, yeah, but if they don't have the regulation skills and we're not explicitly teaching those regulation skills and they're old enough that they should have the regulation skills, what makes us think it's going to magically happen now?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And like, at age is self-regulation skills come in play? Like, I know there has to be some like kind of like hierarchy of self-regulation skills that,
Yeah. That's a great question. And I wish this book went into more detail. It doesn't really, but basically, from the time you're a baby
yeah.
is when stuff could be starting for self regulation, but it depends on what's happening in your environment. So if parents aren't co regulating or don't know how to, then it's going to be really hard for the baby to start developing self regulation skills. Like some of the things babies do to regulate from birth are automatic, right? Like sucking their thumb, um, sucking on a pacifier, like that sucking motion does not, no one has to teach them that. It just happens automatically. And that's how they can regulate themselves. But then when we're starting, like that becomes, it's still a thing. Like even if you or I were to suck through a straw or
Mhm.
have a sucker or something when we're feeling like we're not regulated as adults, that could still have an effect. It's just a lot stronger for newborns. Um,
And I love that.
Go ahead.
No, no, I love that point that you made about um how do babies self-regulate? Well, pacifiers. And I know there's been a trend lately of that people has this idea that um you should not be giving pacifiers to your babies in fear of something else in the future.
Right.
But my thing is like you want to make sure that baby is regulated and happy and relax as much as possible. And if they have a difficult time regulating, well, you want to give them that pacifier anyways to help them regulate.
Right. Yeah. And if you're not going to do the pacifier, then whether or for even parents who did decide to use a pacifier, but now it's time to fade it out because they have teeth coming in or they
Yeah.
need to be talking more. What are you doing to build up those self-regulation skills so that they have a replacement, right? And again, the sucking motion is more, it's automatic. So whether we're co-regulating or giving them strategies to self-regulate, but there has to be some sort of regulatory piece happening.
Yeah.
Or I mean, you can do it, but you're going to create unnecessary stress for the child. This is the quote I was looking for. It says, "It is by being regulated, a child develops the ability to self-regulate. Regulating a child is not at all the same as controlling a child. Rather, it is concerned with managing the child's arousal states until such time as a child can do this on her own. That's what you're doing when you gently rock your baby to calm her, sing to her to help her fall asleep, or playfully engage when it's time for her to be up and about." So, like, generally speaking, every interaction that a parent is having with a baby is helping them stay regulated, whether it's up regulating, like they're tired and it's time to wake up, or down regulating, like they're over at like alert and they need to come down, right? But the parents are the ones helping with that, or should be, right? Whether it's biological or adoptive or whatever caregivers, maybe you have a nanny, whoever it is that's like mostly around the baby is the person that's doing that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of babies where that's not possible. Maybe both parents are working and they're in like a daycare, or and that, no judgment. I'm just saying like that's just what's happening. Or maybe the parents themselves don't have the skill sets or whatever. There's so many different reasons why that wouldn't happen. And of course, that then has an effect. What comes up for me from the autism side of things is these different things that help regulate neurotypical babies don't necessarily have the same effect for neurodivergent.
Hmm.
And instead of teaching parents to, or just society, to be more affirming and honoring of like, hey, there's could be different experiences for babies, just match it, right? Like see what, is regulating for your child. Like my one friend, his daughter is not autistic, but she loved and would regulate super well and fall asleep, like loud screaming. What's the like rah like music? You know what like what is that called? I can't think of the name of it.
Oh,
Not
heavy metal,
Metallica, but like similar.
heavy metal, death
Yeah,
metal,
like heavy metal, like really loud
emo.
screaming, yelling.
I
9 Inch
love that.
Nails, like all that kind of stuff. And like her dad would sing it. And it was Mike that I think he talked about that on the Rye Parenting podcast that we did. But he would put that on and she would fall asleep. And most people would be like, why are you blaring like super loud music? How is that going to help your child? But for that particular baby, that's what worked, And that I think that's where a lot of the arguments come in too with like when people are trying to do um get their child to sleep in like a crib or a bed if they've been co-sleeping and like that transition and crying it out and all that kind of stuff. Like there are some babies that just transition, like you can just lay them down, they're regulated, they're fine, it's no big deal. Then there are other babies where that doesn't happen, and the more the parents try to force it, the more dysregulated they become and the harder it is. Anyway, I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but those are all like, there's so many aha moments when I was reading this book that I'm like, there's so much in here that we're like close in how we're practicing, but we need to shift just a little bit. And having like this insight really brings it home. So like I've been saying for a really long time, based on my own clinical experience, when it comes to teaching how to navigate adverse experiences, we do need to help children tolerate things, and we need to go the next step, help them learn to navigate those safely and regulated, and advocate for themselves if it's too dysregulating, right? Like there's that next step. Or for some children, you won't even get the tolerating piece if there's no regulation happening in the first place. Like if they're completely dysregulated all the time and no time's being spent teaching them how to regulate, then it's going to be hard to teach them to tolerate anything.
Yeah. Yep. And then that goes. So, which one would you focus on first? Would you focus on like working on coping skills or self-regulation skills?
Well, that's why I love this book, because, and like the work that Shanker has done, because you have the 5 domains. So I think part of it depends on where is the stress showing up, right? So like if it's mostly like you look at the biological domain, it's like they're not getting enough sleep, their food habits are awful. They're supplement, like maybe there's some like nutritional supplement piece that needs to be addressed as well. So like that doesn't even have to do with coping or anything, right? Like it's
Yeah,
like
that's
we just
just
need to address like these critical pieces here. Although with some children, like their sleep's not well because they're so dysregulated in other avenues, right? So then we can't even address the sleep yet because they're so dysregulated by the emotional domain. So you can look at the different domains and see where things are showing up and then what we need to work on. But in his work and just work in general on regulation, typically the recommendation is to teach that co-regulation first, where you have an adult that is modeling how, like, what regulation looks like, and they're there as a support. A lot of it, when people think about the work that Hanley's doing and they like PFA SBT, and you see the videos and the adults are like, hey, I'm here for you, like just let me know when you're ready, kind of stuff. Like that sort of supportive piece is first, and within that the child is learning some coping and regulating strategies. And then what I found in the work that I do, and I talk about this in a different workshop, our emotional regulation one, some children it just happens naturally, but if we're explicitly working with clients, we're being brought in because there are differences, right, that need to be addressed, that are unsafe. So what I found is I typically have to explicitly go from co-regulation to self-regulation, where we have programs in place where we're teaching the child to check in on their body, to check in on, are they regulated or not? Should they keep doing this activity or maybe take a break and regulate first and come back? So explicitly going through all of that and coaching, and adults could benefit, children in general, like all of us need this. Like I'm definitely would love someone to just sit next to me all the time and be like, Megan, check in on yourself right now. Like, are you regulated? Because like we just plow through the day and half the time do not even realize how much stress we're holding or like how much dysregulation we're experiencing. And then we blow up.
yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, I can tell you countless times where I know I'm going throughout the day and I can tell like just my body just like or just going through the day like man I'm just tired and like and I know like there's just so much going on like my head feels like I know this not behavior analytic but like my head just feels so foggy and it's just like so over like so much stuff is in there that
yeah,
I can't even think straight and I like it, I wish someone would be like hey Joe like let's figure this out like let's take some time and just get yourself regulated or get yourself in a better mindset.
yeah, yeah. But where there's so much in our society that like we're conditioned to just keep plugging and chugging and like going and making it happen instead of like the research that's been done on mindfulness and looking at people taking care of themselves and regulating shows that workers are actually more productive.
Yeah.
Is given for that, like who would know? Well, and that makes sense because the more stressed we are, the less faculties we have. Like our language, our problem solving abilities, like everything goes down. The more stressed and like more dysregulated we are. So it would make sense if a company gives space for people or if we do it for ourselves to pause and notice like, oops, I'm experiencing a little bit too much stress right now, or I need to take a few minutes to regulate and then come back. They're going to be way more productive than if they're just like, I got to get this done and just like pushing through everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there an assessment that is part of that book that you can
So that's what was one of the questions in the workshop. I haven't yet seen one. I'm wondering if you do the certification, if there's one. I need to do a little bit more digging, but as part of the neuroscience meets ABA workshop, I created a few resources for people. So I'll send it to you, Joe, to look at, and I'd love your feedback on like, oh, this would be really helpful in practice. But I can screen share it for anyone that's actually watching the video. I haven't finished the self-regulation one yet, but I made one that's like the holistic, basically trying to look at how can we incorporate this understanding from behavioral neuroscience and from uh, like the neurobiological understanding of behavior. How can we pull that together to have a more holistic way of looking at when we're trying to do an intake, for example,
yeah.
what kinds of questions we should ask. So I'll show you. I'm not going to read through all of it because it's kind of a lot, but I'll tell you just like the different domains that are on here. So this is based again on like synthesizing all of that information. And some of it you'll be like, oh yeah, we already do that. We ask about those things on intake, but not everyone does. And then a lot of times what I've noticed is people ask about these things at intake, but then it just goes in a file somewhere. It's not actually incorporated into the programming, which is why when you and I talked with Amanda Ralston about Noetic, I was like, this is incredible because people will just have to take this stuff into account. They're no longer just collecting information, but the AI is helping them understand, oh, your client has this medical condition. This could be impacting in this way.
Yep.
So what I did is like there's an action item over here and there's a prompt of like why this is important. So for example, I'm going to do this one. Consider the impact of sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone on mood and behavioral responses, particularly in relation to self-regulation and reinforcement sensitivity. And a lot of behavior analysts would probably read that and be like, what? Why? Why? What are we doing here? So the reason it's help like we need to be looking at it is obviously, as you and I both know, because we've talked about this before, hormonal fluctuations can impact mood, energy, and behavior. So that's why this is on there. And then there's just like a couple of questions to ask, like, are there noticeable patterns in mood or behavior relating to hormonal changes? How might timing of interventions align with hormonal cycles? So, and then you record the data there. So that's the first section. And then there's a section on neurobiological consideration. So it talks about things like sleep, nutrition, sensory processing. There's neuroception and safety scanning. Do you know what neuroception is?
No.
Huh? No? Okay, so this is a big thing we talk about in the workshop as well. But Dr. Porges is the one who's done like a lot of work with this. But basically, it says right here, it's the brain's automatic scanning for safety or threat. So all day long, every day, our bodies, we're breathing automatically. We're also scanning for threats. It's part of human survival. Unfortunately, we sometimes think things are a threat and they're not, right? So, like a teacher giving a student a math worksheet, their body is experiencing that as if a bear is attacking them,
Yeah.
right? And like we've all had stuff like that too. Like, oh, me, it used to be being late to drop my child off at school was like a huge threat to me for whatever reason, based on my conditioning and learning history. And my body would be going through that as if like I was about to like jump off a cliff or something. You know what I mean? So, like, just because our brain is automatically being like threat, 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 it doesn't mean the thing is actually a threat, but it's our body is reacting in that way. And that's where we have to have more of a active noticing of what's happening and then be like, okay, thanks, it's not, we're good, it's not a bear. We're fine. And they talk about that a lot in ACT. They don't say it from a neuroception, they don't use that terminology that I've ever heard, but when you think about ACT and like a lot of the metaphors and things that they're using, it's like we have this constant scanning for threat or safety, and when we don't feel safe, we're usually trying to get away, depending on if you're fight, flight, freeze, or fawn,
Yeah.
but we're trying to do something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this checklist asks questions about that. So, where they are with neuroception, looking at signs of safety. So what's in the environment that helps signal to them that things are safe. Looking for signs of stress, anxiety, and emotional regulation difficulties, evaluating social relationships and co-regulation, assessing their emotional state. And then the next section is contextual and environmental. This gets more similar to like what we would typically see for behavior analytic intakes. Just looking at, but this is questions that, again, I don't think a lot of us necessarily ask, like reviewing routines and structure, because research shows that the more predictable a routine is, the more regulated we are
Yeah.
for most people. It's obviously idiosyncratic, but um, ensuring task demands are developmentally appropriate. And then motivational reinforcement systems, that's pretty much what you would expect. And then lastly, there's a section for follow-up and monitoring. So this doesn't go like step by step through the self-regulation, but the intent of this document is to like maybe add it to your intake or your reassessment. So we make sure we're getting more thorough information about what's going on for a client, and then we can use that to improve our programming. And then like I said, I'm not done with it yet. Hopefully by the end of this week, I will be. The self-regulation document will take people through those 5 different domains and how, from like a behavior analytics standpoint, we can be looking at each of those domains and making sure either we're using universal protocols that incorporate those domains, or we have explicit programming set up if there's a need for actual skills-based treatment within that.
I love it, Megan. I absolutely love it.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed geeking out on this stuff, but I can never be satisfied. I'm like, the things that, I talked about on the podcast in early 2019 with, looking at PFA and SBT and looking at RFT and all of that kind of stuff, like, great. Those are advancements that we're making. And like, we got to keep moving forward. There are other things like we can improve upon. We're never done learning.
No, we're not. We're not. And that's why this podcast is so important, is because it brings to light those things that, we could always do better and
Yes.
continue to learn. So,
Yes, exactly. So those were like the main points for me from the book. I mean, I could sit here and talk with you about it for hours probably, but I do highly recommend. I'll put the link in the show notes. So if folks want to read it, there's also like a website with more information and resources too. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts or questions about what we talked about that we didn't address?
no, I was really um intrigued by the book, and just hearing you talk, and just figuring out, like, just listening to see, like, is there assessment out there? Is there, like, how can we incorporate this into um our sessions? But I think that's for another podcast too.
Yes, for sure. We can definitely dive in on that more. And hopefully we could try to see if there's one of the really cool things about advertising this workshop is quite a few people reached out to me and said like they're behavior analysts who are also interested in neuroscience and now they're getting a degree in it or a certification. So I'm hoping we could like bring some folks on. Maybe we could have like a little panel of people that are studying both because like I made it clear in the workshop, I'm as I do with everything, I'm giving you the information I've taught myself and synthesized into my practices. I am by no means an expert on anything. I'm an expert on collecting resources. So I'm here to like point you about how you can bring this stuff in and start incorporating it at a level that I think is necessary at this point. This information can't exist out in the world. And as behavior analysts, we ignore it. If we're supposed to be truly understanding behavior, and analyzing it, it's not just observable behavior. We have enough now, especially around the inner. And you and I have talked about that
Yeah.
before. So I think we have an ethical duty at this point to have at least a base understanding. And that's what I'm trying to provide folks. But if they're really excited about it, of course, they can go on and get additional training, whether it's graduate level or like a certification program.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And any information that you can gather will help you in the future to be a become a better practitioner, I feel. There's
Yep.
nothing that I mean, and we should be well versed in like, other fields of study so then we can just really identify like, hey, what can I do differently or what can I do better?
Yep. Yep.
Because our world is ever changing. So,
Yeah. I love it. All right. Well, we will be back at our regular time in April. So we'll do the fourth Tuesday of April, whatever that is, at 12 o'clock Eastern. And I don't know, maybe we'll have some behavioral neuroscientist on with us for that one.
that'd be cool. I would love that.
Do you want to close us out, Joe?
Yeah, let's close out. All right. So I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and go forth and do better.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.